If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. Samuel Adams.
The time is near at hand, which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. George Washington.
And what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson.
Posterity, you will never know how much it cost the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that ever I took half the pains to preserve it. John Adams.
I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. Thomas Jefferson.
Government is instituted to protect property, this being the end of government. That alone is a just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where arbitrary restrictions, exceptions, and monopolies deny to part of its citizens the free use of their own faculties. James Madison.
It would be an absurdity for jurors to be required to accept the judge's view of the law against their own opinion, judgment, and conscience. John Adams.
Whenever the legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience, and are left to the common refuge which God hath provided for all men against force and violence. John Locke.
It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. The gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here, idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry.
My people perish for the lack of knowledge. God.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Let me get this shut off. We're getting a little bit more technological here.
That was great.
Episode 455 of Patriots Lament Radio. Good morning to a couple of you already online here. If you followed our weekday shows, yesterday we went through the Alaska statute describing the emergency powers that the governor has, and check out episode 454 for that info. Mike and Josh put up some really good stuff. We'll cover that, but essentially the compliance with the so-called mandates is voluntary. And so in some cases, probably a good idea, but it's not legally enforceable. So in cases where it's a bad idea, there's no legal consequence for it. And it appears the state has exposed itself to basically massive lawsuits. So that's something we talked about yesterday. So if you hit our YouTube channel and look for episode 454, you will find mandates or suggestions. I'm going to post a link in the live chat right now. Right there. And today, we are going to do a little bit of an economic wrap-up. We didn't really do an economic wrap-up for the week, just because so much else was going on. But there appears to be some semblance of a recovery. There appears to be even mainstream sources saying, the coronavirus is over, or at least the peak of the chaos is over for now. So there's likely going to be so-called green shoots maybe economic factors won't take such a big spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. And there's an opportunity here in the next couple months, actually probably less than that, to get in on the ground floor of some big stuff like mining stocks and things like that. If you're in such a position, and if you're not in such a position, there's an opportunity to figure out how to reorient yourself, because there's going to be some pretty big shakeups. Some stuff's not going to come back, like we've talked about. Some sectors aren't going to come back, and there's likely to be large price inflation. So this show on Saturday here, we are mostly going to get into the economic side of things, and we are also going to kick the phones out there. I'm going to put the phone in number now. We have not heard from anybody on our weekday shows. So if you have anything to say about those shows or this one, give us a call in at that number. We got it all dialed in with the YouTube stream, so we'll get you on air. Josh, we talked a little bit about oil this week, of course, which went negative. It went to WTI crude went to negative $36 on Monday. And this is sort of a perfect storm for energy intensive resource type industry, aka mining. And especially with the gold, like the gold price is up through the roof. The oil price went negative, which is kind of an aberration, but whatever. It's like $15 right now. And there's likely high inflation coming. So we've been talking about some mining opportunities. We've been talking about International Tower Hill in Livengood. For those of you in Fairbanks, they actually have an office on Gaffney Street. And then we've also been talking about this Tectonic Metals, which has 3 Alaska projects. These are gold mining projects in Alaska. We're trying to get more info on them. They could be a big deal. What are your thoughts? Like, you're in logistics, and oil's, the slope's messed up for all sorts of reasons, right? You got coronavirus, but then you got low oil prices, you got BP leaving. Is there a possibility of a shift to for the people who can stay, for the people who are left, to get some action in the mining scene?
I think if they're early on it, because there's not a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
That could change later this year. It's still early in the spring. We're still, snow's melting and the rivers are breaking up, so it's still early. So hopefully there'll be more opportunities there coming up. But not only is BP leaving or wanting to leave, and they have wanted to leave, but now the Hilcorp sell, the purchase of BP by Hilcorp's kind of been put on hold, it looks like. 3 of their major financiers were backed out of the deal. 3 banks that were going to help with that. On the other hand, BP's holdings have dropped almost by half their value on the North Slope.
Okay.
The last month and a half. So,
is that because of the fall in the price of oil, or they actually have less
no,
field?
Just the fall of oil.
Okay.
Just the fall. And then last night it was announced, Alaska announced that they're dropping the flow through of the Alaska pipeline by 50,000 barrels a day, which is quite a bit since we're not really putting a lot through it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But they have nowhere to put it. So that makes a lot of sense. Plus, monetarily, Hilcorp has pulled back on some of the projects they had. Oil search stopped the major projects that they had up there, which were huge. And Conoco, I think, is almost about $500 million in money they were planning on spending that they've just said we're not spending it up there anymore. So there's got to be a shift away from that. At least maybe it's only a year, but maybe it's longer. But even a year's time, who's got resources sitting around to run a company for a year?
Yeah,
And
especially a company that's got equipment. There's just no
right.
Yeah.
Even if you could survive a year, how do you start back up?
Yep.
It's costly.
Yep.
Then we have, like you mentioned, Tectonic. They have 3 projects in Alaska, all of them on Doyon lands. If people don't know, Doyon is Doyon's a native corporation. And Doyon's put, for them, maybe not as significant, but $1.5 million into their stock this week. So something to keep an eye on. These projects that they have some of them aren't as reachable, but I think one of them is just outside of Eagle. And they're going forward with them. They're actually they're not just, we hold these claims. They're going to do some work with them. So that's good.
Yeah. Here's their Tibbs project. I don't own Tectonic yet, but I am planning to buy Tectonic on Monday.
Yeah, I'm planning on it too.
Tibbs project, 35 kilometers east of Pogo. Anchored by Pogo Mine and operated by Northern Star Resources. These are the guys who bought Pogo. Pogo was owned by like Hamatsu or something like that. They were owned by a Japanese company. They just got bought by, it was either Northern Star or some Australian company. So they're going to use their mill. They're going to use the Pogo mill. High-grade mineralization, and they did a drilling campaign last year.
They're not new to the industry. That's a good thing too.
Tectonic.
Like
yeah. Oh yeah, the whole Pogo thing. Here's where Pogo is, and here's the Tibbs project. So there it is in Alaska, right there. So yeah, that would be serviced by the Interior, and then these other. Let's look at these other projects. Project 2, Northway. "40 kilometers along the Alaska State Highway. Working in the area, so Royal Gold is in there and Freeport's in there. Let's take a look at the location. Okay, yep, sure. Northway Junction. It's out towards the Canadian border.
Yeah.
Right here. This is the Alaska Highway. There's Northway. And then let's look at the last one here.
That's pretty good. It's pretty accessible.
That's pretty accessible, right on the road there. Northway, Project 2. Project 3, 70 Mile. What is 70 Mile all about? 40 kilometer long gold belt. This is the one that the agreement with Doyon. Comprehensively covers all aspects of exploration, development, production, and royalties. There it is. Numerous high-grade gold intersections in the drill core from limited drill campaigns. They've been doing drills out there for 32 years. 77 drill holes, no exploration since 2000. Interesting. They've kind of been sitting. Live and Good, I don't think any real action has happened out in Live and Good. I'm going to bring them up here shortly in like 10 years. But the resources are fairly well known as far as I can tell. Mike can give us probably a better assessment of that. Here is the 70 Mile project for Tectonic. 70 Mile Gold Belt.
I think that's the one that's close to Eagle.
Yes, right. Okay. Yeah, there's no map of Alaska here. But yeah. Parts per billion gold. So these are historical sites. So this is kind of a similar play to Live and Good, where you had a bunch of small claims and you knew they were fairly rich, and then they bought all the claims and then went back and did a bunch of drills
Hmm.
to verify them. 4.37 grams per ton. 187.9 grams per ton. That's serious. Interesting.
What?
Right there on Flanders.
What are they doing?
I don't know. I would be down there.
Give me a backpack. I'll start hiking.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty good. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still, locations when we're talking pretty accessible. We're still talking about the Alaska wilderness, so it's not, even things that are along the highway. That doesn't mean it's like, oh, I can see it from here and just hop, skip, and jump. A lot of these places are in, there's a lot of swamp and tundra areas and black spruce, which we all know what that means. Really wet.
Permafrost.
When Pogo was, had friends that were involved with that, hauling all the infrastructure up there, and it was 1.5 feet. It was amazing what they went through to get that, all the equipment, the buildings, and everything that they had up there. It's pretty cool. I mean, but it can be done.
Mm-hmm. It can be done, and that's one of the, I think, one of the opportunities. That would have been fun. Oh yeah, oh baby. So they did.
That's where I would have got in, right
29
there.
cents. Yeah,
And
so
I would have sold at the bottom there. Yep.
yeah, that's usually where I sell. I usually buy up about $8-10, and then I like to sell down at about 10 cents. Then you get to write those losses off. It's really sweet.
Oh yeah, it's all part of the financial planning.
TSXV, I can buy it with Canadian dollars without having to go through an exchange. Hooray! So one of the things with mining, like here's the Lament project. This is International Tower Hill. These guys have an office in Fairbanks. We're actually going to reach out to them. We're going to see if we can get their contact Rick Soley on our show. I was supposed to do that this week, but I am a slacker. Here they are, 506 Gaffney Road, Suite 200. I actually I was at the miners banquet a couple years ago, and it so happens to be on my mom's birthday, and I was visiting her, and she was a guest, and I ran into a guy there. We got talking. I was like, "What do you do?" He's like, "Oh, I'm with International Tower Hill," and I was like, "That still exists?" And he said, "Yeah," and because I bought a bunch. Tower Hill is what I bought at $8, and it's about 60 cents right now. Because I had a renter who was working out there, and he was saying, "Man, they consolidated all these little claims, and then they did a bunch of drills." And he said the assays were pretty good, and so I'm making money with a renter who's working out there, who's telling me good stuff about it. So I was like, oh, I'll shovel a few $1,000 into that, and they went from about $8 to 50 cents. So for those of you at home, you take a few $1,000, you divide it by 16, and then that's what you get when you sell at 50 cents. So anyway, I hadn't looked into them in like 10 years. And I was like, they're still in operation? And this guy, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Rick Soley. But he said, yeah, we're still in operation. Like we're just chilling. We're just sitting on it. The price of gold's not going down. And we never got the operation running. So what does it cost us to sit on the claim? So they were waiting. Their main, for Tower Hill, it's the Live and Good Gold project, their main challenge is they don't have a large electrical power run out there. And so if they want to run a mill, they got to do it off like diesel or something like that. And that was never economically viable. Also, they could never get the time of day from, GVA and the state to help them with the project because, like Josh was saying, gold is a relatively small deal compared to oil in Alaska. I don't know what it is, 1/8, 1/10. It's a lot less. But the state of Alaska is not going to be able to argue with the international oil price. Like they're just not going to.
Right.
So I think I don't know anything for a fact, but it wouldn't surprise me if the state actually doubled down on helping some of the mining projects, especially with gold holding its price quite nicely through this economic collapse. And with the price of energy dropping through the floor. Like, if oil stays at $15 a barrel, these guys in Live and Good might be able to run their mill off diesel, you know?
Yep.
So anyway, they've been, here's some stuff about their gold reserves. 9 million, so 9 million ounces at $12.50 an ounce. That's the production cost. And that's on a 0.71 grams per ton. So over here, Tectonic, we were looking at what, as high as like 100 grams per ton was one of the historic. I mean, it got worked, but these guys are making money at 0.7 grams a ton. And then there's another reserve, 11.5 million ounce estimated at 1230 ounces, or $12.30 per ounce, so around the same price at 0.68 grams per ton. So that's 20 million ounces. Let's play this game. 20 million times, let's talk about $2,000 gold. So that's 40 billion gross, and then if they're producing at 1230, they're only making about 40% profit. Let's call it 20. That's a cool $8 billion profit if they make 20% on each ounce comes out. So, and we had an article. My mom actually sent me an article this week. Bank of America is calling for. I'm going to pull it up. Bank of America, 3,000 gold. Bank of America is calling for $3,000 gold. And Bank of America is not exactly one of these, libertarian, anti-establishment institutions. Let's take a look at this. Gold to reach $3,000, 50% above its record. Blah, blah, blah. I don't want to hear you talking. Bank of America says the Fed can't print gold. Okay? Bank of America, who is like, a bailout recipient, says the Fed can't print gold. Like, is this actually happening?
Right.
And so these guys, as analysts, including Michael Widmer, I have no idea who these people are, raised their target from 2,000 as policymakers across the globe unleash vast amounts of fiscal and monetary stimulus to help shore up economies hurt by coronavirus. As economic output contracts sharply, fiscal outlays surge, and central bank balance sheets double. Fiat currencies could come under pressure, the report says. Investors will aim for gold. This is Bank of America saying this, okay? This is what Robert Wenzel said on our show 2 weeks ago. I think it was episode 425 or something. No, 425 is Colin Grabo. But anyway, Robert Wenzel said the same thing. B of A expects bullion to average U.S. $16.95 an ounce this year, U.S. $20.63 in 2021. The record of U.S. $1921.17 was set in September 2011. We all remember that. That was fun. That was when silver went up to $50 an ounce. Spot prices traded around U.S. $16.80 on Tuesday and are up 11% this year, when the Dow is down almost, 30%. To be sure, a strong dollar, reduced financial market volatility, and lower jewelry demand in India and China could remain headwinds of gold, Bank of America said. But beyond traditional gold supply and demand fundamentals, financial repression is back on an extraordinary scale.
That's an extraordinary thing for them to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Bank of America saying that. So I don't know. So their 18-month gold price target is 3,000. So they don't think it'll average that, but they think it'll kiss 3,000. So if you are International Tower Hill or Tectonic Metals, especially ITH has, I believe they have their geological site map already done. If you can boogie and oil prices are cheap, and the state of Alaska is actually going to give you the time of day and actually kind of support you, it could be on like Donkey Kong for some of these things. And these guys, let's look at their. I'm sure they have a stock ticker on here. Oh, to heck with this. ITH is their Canadian symbol. EHM is their US symbol. No, I don't want that. Tower Hill. ITH. Good looking chart. There we go. I'm thinking make this a lot bigger. Let's look at like a 1 year. Kind of faint line, but anyway, they were down here during the collapse. They've come up sharply. I can show you when I bought them and sold them. I bought them right here. This was an awesome time to buy them. And then I sold them down here. So this was the ramp where people thought they were heading to production, right? And this is 2010. This is 10 years ago. Gold prices are lower, oil prices are higher, and the world economic situation is much more stable than it is now. This is 2 years after the housing collapse. So, so if you guys think that this was a reasonable price for them, anywhere around $5, that's like a 10x increase in share price from where they are here. So anyway, this is the kind of stuff that's going on. Mike, what do you think about the mining sector in Alaska and a potential rebound during these odd times?
Yeah, well, should we first have Mike give his credentials as an expert in this situation?
I'm not an expert.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Mike totally is an expert.
Yes, you are, Mike.
No, I just have a degree in mining engineering. I worked in the field for a few years.
That's more than most experts get that are on TV. So you're way ahead.
Yeah, the 186 grams per ton is pretty impressive at that one place. I think at Rock Creek we're doing 2 grams per ton. I mean, and of course if the price of the gold increases, then they can redesign the pit at a higher gold price and use lower grade ore as part of their ore count. So the ore body is defined by what's profitable to mine, essentially. So it changes shape as the price changes. So that could go up or down. But gold is gold's probably going to fluctuate for a little bit, but it's ultimately going to go up because you have the price increase in gold right now is based largely out of the demand from Europe because of the monetary crisis going on there.
Okay, that's where the global demand's coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People are panicking and trying to find some gold to cash out their euros, basically. So yeah, that's going to continue to increase, and as people lose confidence in their respective governments, that's going to support the gold price further.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the real boom in gold will be people losing confidence in their governments.
And you think it'll be probably like we've talked about the unlikelihood of a dollar collapse, just being practical, but the high likelihood of stuff like a euro collapse or the Brazilian real, which is just dying right now.
Yeah.
So you think that gold supporting gold price factor, number one, international currency death, and there'll be some flooding into the dollar, but a lot of flooding into gold too.
Yeah, it's going to be both. I mean, people are just going to be getting out of their European currency, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of flooding into the dollar, into U.S. equities, and you're going to see people moving away from bonds, which are, and that's both in Europe and in the U.S. So
Okay, Michael, get back. Supporting factor number 2, I think. So supporting factor number 1, international currency's dying. Like Mike says, people moving out of bonds and moving into something. They'll probably move into dollars too. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the dollar index versus gold. I mean, the gold price in dollars will tell us that. But the gold price and everything else will probably go up, even if the dollar is going up. Number 2 for me is price inflation.
Yeah.
Gold does a fairly good job of dealing with price inflation, and that's that Bank of America article we were talking about. I'm going to post the link in the live chat. There's if regular boring mainstream, pillage you corporatist fascist banks are telling you that the gold price is going to go way up because the Fed's being loose with money, you can probably bet that the gold price is going to go up. So I'm going to put number 2, price inflation. And we're calling it price inflation because the inflationary event has already happened. The money has already been issued. Price inflation is when all that money leaks into the market, when the COVID-19 stuff is lifted. People are going to go out and spend that money, and that's when price inflation is going to happen. So that's what we're talking about. It hasn't happened yet, but it will. Number 3, I think, oil prices. Low energy prices in general. That's going to make production a lot easier. And in Alaska in particular, there's going to be a lot more clamoring for anything that'll bring money into the state. And so I think the support of the mining industry is going to be a lot better in the next couple of years than it has been in the past, especially with the slope basically shut down.
Well, and the miners themselves just having lower prices to explore and do whatever they're gonna, even if they're not go beyond exploring and actually mining and processing, going from $3.50 a gallon, if it, for fuel, if it drops down to $1. You basically made a couple dollars right there in your explorations or in your mining.
Yeah, your cost. So we were looking at that, like Tower Hill Mine. They estimate they can produce at $12.50 an ounce. That's an old estimate. With energy prices through the floor like that, it might be lower, and the gold price is higher. So anyway, so buying gold is something that we've talked about before. One of the downsides of gold is it doesn't do anything. It just sits there. It doesn't yield a dividend. Good management, like with a mining company, if it's managed well, it's a productive venture. It's employing people. It's an active participant in the economy. So mining companies can way outperform gold. It's like an automotive company can outperform the steel industry. They use steel, but if they do a good job with it, they transform it into something that increases in value more rapidly than the commodity they use. And in Fairbanks, we should all, if we're interested in it, we should all be able to get a lot of information, just word of mouth and from local businesses that support these mining projects. And that's as close as you can get to insider trading without living on Wall Street.
Yep.
So it's a pretty big opportunity. It's a good time to put your ear to the ground and see what's going on with these projects and get in on them. And there's a bunch of ways to get in. There's going and doing work with them. There's buying some shares in their project. There's all sorts of things. So while there is plenty of bleakness going on out there in the financial world, that's sort of a silver or golden lining.
One of
Mike,
my favorite songs.
take us through. You were talking about international currencies dying. That's point number 1 for support of the gold price. Take us through the rest of that. You got cut off.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we're good. I think I was talking about what bonds when it broke. Anyway, So you're going to see people moving into private assets, into equities, and away from bonds. And the bond market is in large part what supports the pension funds, especially government pension funds. So, um, but you have you have bonds right now that have no yield. They all have no yield. So why would anyone buy them?
It's just the same as owning dollars.
Yeah, it's and in fact it's owning dollars cash as the value of the currency rises. It's fine to hold cash too.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so the European market is dead. I mean, the European bond market died months ago. The ECB became the only buyer of European bonds. January. I can't remember now. It's been several months. So that bond market is effectively dead.
So the euro, they can't sell European bonds anymore.
Right. Who wants to buy that? Who wants to pay to hold a supposed asset?
Well, that's a good point, Mike. I think that really can't be overemphasized is that we're not just talking about, a coronavirus crash.
Mm-hmm.
We're the markets and, the bond markets and everything, we're already at the tipping point. The dollar values and what you just said about in Europe, they were already in a bad spot. Their debt ratio is incredible. I mean, there's one of the European Union countries is always in the news about, they're going to fold tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So this coronavirus stuff, they're blaming it on that, but it was already there.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at an article here.
Problems are already there.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at an article here from September 12th, 2019, long before coronavirus, like you're talking about, Josh. And right here, European Central Bank cuts its deposit rate, launches new bond buying program.
Mm-hmm.
20 billion euros per month. The ECB cut its main deposit rate by 10 basis points to negative 0.5, a record low. This is before coronavirus.
Mm-hmm. Right, and some of those bonds, they were the European market. The ECB was running a scam bond market to try to make up for it for the real bond market. They were selling what they call them pandemic bonds, and basically you buy into this bond, and if there's no pandemic, then you get a payout. But of course, they've never been able to pay out because there's always a pandemic that comes up and ruins it, right? So it's nothing more than a Las Vegas gamble, and that's one of the things that they were relying on to sell bonds. I think they came out with coronavirus bonds recently.
Of course they did.
Uh-oh.
Let me see.
Do you? Interesting.
And when we talk about money printing, the Federal Reserve is already talking about sending large piles of cash to the European Union and the ECB. We could see several $1 trillion get printed up and shipped overseas to them to bolster up their economies, banks, whatever it is, whatever crony gets the money. But that's just going to add more to the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, especially with, you think about what's going on with the different municipalities and everything, states, local municipalities, state municipalities, they're all banking on a bailout from the Federal Reserve, and it's going to happen. And that's going to be trillions of dollars.
Even like the FNSB, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. They're going to get some money. I mean, the state of Alaska, they're kind of in a battle right now between the governor and the legislature, some in the legislature, because they have, $1.2 billion of coronavirus funds. And the governor's already said, okay, well, we're going to give local municipalities $558 million of these funds. So while that money's already been sent to them, that's just going to be a tip of the iceberg. It's going to be a lot more as times go on. Especially Alaska is going to be maybe not so much in a hurt box as far as the federal government's concerned, because they're going to go, well, you have this big dividend permanent fund that you can get into. But the other states, California, New York, all those other states, there's only two
Illinois.
or three solvent states in the whole United States that were somewhat solvent. They're already broke, and this is going to be their opportunity, without anyone complaining, to get bailouts from the Federal Reserve.
So
which
that
adds to the price inflation.
That is, yeah. So instead of something to get our libertarian sensibilities all disrupted about, we can actually do something. Like, here we are. We all remember 2008, 2009. I think so. Like, raise your hand if you remember 2008, 2009. And I also did a bunch of stupid stuff in the dot-com bubble. Like, I was around for that. And so here we are again. And we could wave signs and agitate for policy changes. We could sign petitions to end the Federal Reserve. I've done that before.
We could stand around and go, "I told you so," while we're in the bread lines.
Right.
I saw this coming. Should have listened to me.
Right. Or we can do something.
Yep.
And interestingly, this actually appears, the gold bugs have been talking about this for 50 plus years. There was a guy I met at Anarchapulco who was talking about that, actually. He'd been in gold for like 50 years. And he lost his shirt on it because, like, the rest of the world moved on for the reasons we talked about. Gold doesn't do anything. It's a lousy asset to hold long term. It's money. But it doesn't do anything. If he'd made 3% dividend on some productive stock for the last 50 years, he would have been way money ahead. But here we are, and all of the signs of the times are lining up to actually be somewhat representative or somewhat resembling the actual time when gold becomes more relevant. It's not going to become the currency. Like, I hope nobody's holding their breath for that. But the price is set to go up significantly. And as far as gold mining is concerned, which should be on Fairbankson's radar, like, it appears to be game on. And so we're all in a place where we can see this. So we can actually do something with it instead of just, try to change policy or something. And it's very obvious the policy direction is not going to change. Like Mike pointed out, in Europe, they're down the river. And in the U.S., like Josh was saying, in the U.S., these policies are just going to go on. The municipalities, the cities, and the states are all broke, like beyond broke. So these policies are going to go on.
Unfortunately, because what it means is that it doesn't give them any incentive to curb spending at all. I mean, with having the good old Federal Reserve printing money for them, it just encourages let's spend more.
So
they'll take any excuse they can to spend more money. So I'm sure that in a crisis situation, there'll be a reason that they need to spend more money on some program or some service, and there just won't be the tax base to support it.
Yeah.
You're gonna have probably rising property taxes as a result of it, but at the same time, falling real estate values, because there's just no bid on the real estate. People can't afford to buy a house, and even if they could afford a down payment, they can't find a bank that's going to loan the money. And so that would be the consequence of the deflation that comes beforehand. And then it'll be after that you see the real loss in confidence in government and potential inflation.
Yeah, even
Mhm.
Bank of America is saying, hey, the Federal Reserve's lost their marbles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you were saying before, the economic crisis that has come and been excused, or it's been explained by the coronavirus. It was already projected to come. I've been keeping, I had been reading about it for a couple of years ahead of time, and it came right on schedule. But interestingly, it was coronavirus was the supposed reason. But really, what's going on is that it's a matter of looking at the capital flows, um, and seeing what's going to happen to the economy in the future. Um, what excuse are they going to use to justify it?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you see the capital flows, and you see the crisis coming, but there has to be some excuse to be applied to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So coronavirus was it was convenient. It was a good excuse to shut the economy down. It was a good reasoning for why the economy crashed. But it was already coming, and we've been talking on the show probably 2 years ago about how it was going to be coming in this time frame.
Yeah.
But and that was other people's stuff that I had been reading. It looks like I figured it out. So
Yeah, we were paying attention.
yeah.
The trying to find some U.S. mortgage industry stuff, but the U.S. housing market is also getting real weak in fall 2019. So that guy was looking for a fall too. So anyway, yeah, all this stuff comes together. So during this rebound period, there's an opportunity to get some ducks in a row and to get positioned for the next wave.
Yeah, and I would guess that it'll be, I don't know, maybe a year from now you'll see a lot of foreclosures on the market, because they put off was the Alaska had put a moratorium on foreclosures and rents and various bills as of was it last week, I think. And so when will they allow foreclosures to occur again? And so when that happens, you're probably going to see a lot of them pop up.
I think there's going to be more money bailout with that also, Mike, because I've already been seeing a lot in different comment sections concerning, well, the good old government's telling us that they're going to stop repossessions and blah, blah for the next 3 months and this and that. And people are saying, well, okay, but we still owe it.
They'll still have to pay it at the end.
In 3 months, we have to. Well, it's not at the end yet. That hasn't been made law. I mean, if they put those 3 months at the end of the loan, that's one thing. But so far, they haven't done that. So what people are asking is like, okay, so at the end of 3 months, I owe 4 months worth of rent or mortgage payments. How the heck am I going to do that when I haven't been working for the last 4 months? So they're either going to have to push it back, and that's going to cause mortgage holders and renters to say, or landlords to say, we need money. We can't afford to go these 3-4 months without having these people pay. That's a lot of people's income. Think of different landlords here in town that we know. Their income is their renters, their rentals. So I expect to see. Yeah, I expect to see some sort of a bailout for that too, especially to the banks. The banks will whine and cry, even though they've made more money than anyone so far over this last month with the bailout programs. They'll come up with a reason to get more. So I think either way, either if it's help us pay these last 3 months to the people that owe it, or help us make up for these last 3 months to the people that are owed to. Just more. What I'm saying is more money, more printing, more printing, more printing, more price inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
we're also just talking about. We don't really think this, but you know, we're talking like things go back to some sort of new normal, and we can't forget that we really think. I personally think that the stage is just being set for this fall, for this to start all over again. So this is kind of like the sounding board. What can we get away with? What can we get away with? Oh, look at this. If we print this much money and give it to everyone, they're fine with sitting at home for 2 or 3 months. Wait till November when they say, all right, coronavirus is back. We're shut down till next May. And don't think that can't happen. I think there's probably only about 2 or 3% of the people that are even wanting to lift the restrictions right now. Most of the American people want the lockdown to continue because they're so freaking scared.
I have a friend of mine here in Ontario, my buddy Chris, and he made the comment that, like, he's just kind of a casual observer. He's into a little bit of the conspiracy stuff, but he was saying, you know, this feels like a test run. This feels like a test run to me, like getting everybody used to the lines. You know, he observed that, like, there's still, like, even in a grocery store that has limited people in it, there's still like 40 or 50 people in there. And if this were like super ultra real deal, there would be uniformity, and maybe there wouldn't be because the government doesn't really have a good handle on things. But there'd probably be more uniformity in how things are handled. So, like, you go to a bunch of all the hardware stores are shut down here, where I'm at, and so he like needs a key made for his house. You have to like drive up and then like hand a guy a key out the window, and then he like sanitizes it, goes in, makes it, and comes out with it. That's to get a key made. But if you want to go to the grocery store, they only let 50 or 60 people in the store. But you're just in there, and you're supposed to stay a certain distance away. But people are going to buy fruit, and they handle it. How does this orange feel? Whatever. And so the way that it's handled is totally inconsistent, and that's what made him kind of think this feels like training. This feels like a training run. It's not important. Like, that's the reason you practice stuff, is you can make mistakes when you're practicing.
Yeah.
And it normalizes behavior in a way where the consequences are mild. So yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all if this happens again in the fall. They're talking about that in China. There's some second wave stuff that may or may not be happening. And I've heard people talking about a start stop thing, right? Where you wait until the cases go down, and then you open things up again, and that at least gets some stuff made, and some productive activity. And then as the caseload goes back up, you shut down again to keep those numbers down. So anyway, you can make a case for doing that, like on a policy side of things. You can make a case for not doing that on a whole bunch of different angles, but it's likely to happen.
I believe they're planning on it.
Mm-hmm.
And we can later, if we want. A phone call I had last night makes me think so even more. They're planning on it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, the title of this show is Positioning for the 2020 Economic Rebound and Inflation. So we are in the economic rebound right now. It doesn't look like it because all the businesses are closed. But if you look at the U.S. dollar index and the stock market and the price of gold and everything, this is it. Like, I don't think there's a bigger rebound coming after this.
That's a good point.
Yeah, this is the buying opportunity when stuff's cheap. The stuff that survives is going to be subject to price inflation, and the stuff that doesn't survive is going to go to zero. I mean, that's the way I see it. So everything's on sale right now, and some of the stuff on sale is going to go to zero, and some of the stuff on sale is going to go through the moon, like through the roof to the moon. There you go. So I don't know. That's what it seems like to me.
Well, I would see real estate prices continuing down. Like we were talking about a few minutes ago, um, when people have to start paying their mortgages again or face foreclosure, then they just start piling them on the market. So I would not be surprised to see house prices just collapse in the next year.
What is that? That goes back to municipalities that rely heavily on property taxation. What Fairbanks North Star Borough? What are they going to do when property values collapse? We're just theorizing here, but say the property values collapse, and they're like, "Oh, look, property values went up 15% again! Yay!" And it was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, their assessment will be totally out of line with the markets.
I don't think they can let. I don't think that the federal government can let the dollar price of houses fall. There's too many. I've thought about this. I could be wrong, but if they let the dollar price of houses fall, then they're going to have to bail out the banking industry, and they're going to have to bail out municipalities to keep schools open. And keeping schools open is like ultra high on the government's priority list.
Yes.
And so if there's a municipal tax crisis because the nominal dollar value of housing has collapsed, that means they have to bail out the banks, who will all be defaulting. The banks fractional reserve scheme will collapse. There'll be a massive credit collapse, and all municipalities everywhere will collapse all at the same time. So I think no matter what, they have to keep the price of housing inflated. I don't know how they do that. And so I agree. I think the value of housing. See, that's the thing. That's how is that going to play out? Because I think Mike's assessment is spot on. In like 6 months or a year, there's going to be a bunch of people defaulting on their payments. As soon as the requirement to make your payments comes back, people are going to start missing them. In a huge, like even 5% of people totally collapses the market.
Yep.
And how many jobless claims are there right now? Like 35 million or something, or 50 million. It's crazy. So that whole thing collapses. But I don't think the government can allow the dollar price of houses to fall. Or if they do,
so which
know.
is cheaper, bailing out homeowners or bailing out municipalities and banks?
I think that universal basic income in a large enough amount that people can continue to pay for their houses is cheaper than bailing out banks and municipalities.
Yep, absolutely.
It's more politically tenable too, because the money's going straight to people.
For the federal government to pay everyone's mortgage is cheaper than bailing out the banks and the municipalities, I think.
Right. Just like the student loan, like I actually think the student loan forgiveness thing is awesome. And I think at some point there'll just be entire 100% student loan forgiveness. But they'll have to ease it.
It will.
Yeah.
It will. And now you said something pretty controversial, Dave, so you got to expand on that. Why the student loans?
Because it's a government loan anyway, and it's like it would be one of the fastest ways to good question. So the government bamboozled a lot of people into universities for useless degrees by creating cheap money to go to school. The government made all these easy to get loans to go into massive debt. And a bunch of kids went to school and got degrees that are not super productive. Like urban planning degrees are only good if your municipal tax base is growing and your municipality can hire people to rezone people and steal their wood stoves. When there's not enough money to do that, all of your urban planners out there are out of a job. And then like HR is largely created through, you have all these government agencies that regulate how businesses have to operate. You got OSHA, and you got all these, diversity hire boards, and that creates the need to have an HR department to monitor all the employee regulations that exist. And so the government created its own demand for these useless degrees that cost a bunch of money that you have to get a government loan to get. And in a time like this, a lot of those non-essential workers, a lot of them have basket weaving degrees, for $50,000-$60,000 that the government got them into. And so I think the federal government has to bail them out, has to forgive the student loans. And the student loan debt is non-recourse debt. So that means you can't walk away from it. A house you can walk away from. Like the house is the asset. And so if you default on the house, the bank gets the house. The agreement you make up front is, if I let you take the house, I don't have to pay you anymore. But with a student loan, there's no collateral. Mm-hmm. The collateral is you as a slave. And so those
and the money's already gone, like you've pointed out before. The money's spent.
Yeah, exactly. And they can barely service that debt working at Starbucks. Starbucks is not going to reopen the same way. They just won't be able to service the debt. And what's the government? Is the federal government going to put a bunch of people with crappy degrees in prison? I mean, that's what they would ultimately have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's no way that's going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. And so I think they'll forgive it. I mean, they'll just have to. Or it'll be like, it could be, see, I don't know exactly how this is going to play out. I just don't see how they can enforce discipline anywhere, because they've encouraged everybody not to have any. So it could be that your universal basic income form has like check boxes, right? Do you have a mortgage? Do you have student loan debt? And you check the boxes, and then your UBI, your monthly universal basic income, is based on, whatever your situation is. If you got a mortgage, maybe they give you an extra $500 or $1,000 a month. If you got student loan debt to service, maybe they look at that amount, and they help you out with that. So I don't know how they'll do it, but I think they have to cover it.
Well, I think that's the point of why it's a good idea for them to just quote unquote forgive it, because since the money's already spent, one way or the other, they're going to bail this stuff out. So is it better to have them printing an extra $500 to $1,000 a month to give kids to pay for their student loan debt, or is it better just to forget it? Because either way, the two scenarios that are the most likely, the kids aren't paying it back. They're not going to pay it back. So do we print more money to pay it back, or do we just say, well, let's just call it a loss?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. In a world where they want to insert more dollars into the economy, who knows?
They'll probably want to pay for it.
They'll probably pay for it.
Yeah, even though it goes back to them. So over here in the chat, Layla's talking about, where was it? Oh, I'm going to try one of David's cool tricks here. Bam.
Ooh, nice.
I'm getting good. The piece says they don't have to pay off debts. What do you think about that? Oh, and I'm going to throw Rick a bone. Oh, whoa. I would have thrown Rick a bone earlier if I would have saw what his avatar was.
Yeah, that's pretty rad. I don't think I agree with the sentiment of Layla's post, and I don't think UBI is sustainable. We're not talking about sustainable anything here, and we're not talking about what we want. We are talking about what is likely to happen.
Or teaching lessons.
Libertarians spend all their damn time talking about what they want, and the world passes them by because the world does not give one crap what we want. So that's not what we're talking about. And we're not even saying that we agree with any of this. We're saying that this is what's likely to happen.
It's better to forgive the debt than to print more money to pay the debt.
Right. The scenario where people are held responsible for the debt they have, it just doesn't exist. And yeah, I think I agree. Like, it would be good let's say it would have been good for these kids to have learned how to handle money and what debt is and how to service it. But that didn't happen. And punishment doesn't teach. Like, there's actually libertarian punishment theory now, where a bunch of guys got into, okay, you have a voluntarist society, but you need to enforce boundaries and property rights. And people have started looking into how well does punishment change behavior over the long run into the future for adults, right? We're not talking about, well, even with children, but for adults in particular, punishment does not help people become more economically responsible. You take somebody and you put them in prison, they don't come out of prison with more discipline. They come out with radically less. And so punishing 20 and 30-year-olds with student loan debt the negative outcomes from that are huge. And one of the downsides of the student loan debt, Layla mentioned bankruptcy. I think bankruptcy is awesome. Bankruptcy is a really great tool for debt forgiveness. It's essentially what it is. It's a renegotiation. Well, student loan debt is not expunged in bankruptcy.
Yep.
Declaring bankruptcy does not get rid of student loan debt. And so the federal government's going to have they're going to be faced with, do we want to have like 10 or 15 or 20% of our population being zero credit score, debt-ridden zombies forever? Or do we just want to call it even and let them go? I mean, that's kind of the situation. And even from like a libertarian standpoint, debt forgiveness would be better than having people be saddled for 30 or 40 years. But anyway, I mean, that's my opinion. But outside of my opinion, it's not normal debt, right? It's a bizarre form of debt that never, ever, ever goes away.
And it's going to be handled one way or the other. It's not going to be, they're not going to be saddled with debt for the next 30 or 40 years. The government's not going to allow that to happen. So do we have universal income or some sort of bailout that introduces 1.2 trillion more dollars, or you just get rid of the debt?
Yeah.
Neither one of them is what adults find or should find to be the best scenarios, but one of the two are going to happen. So which one would be better?
Yeah, none of them are good. We're not advocating that these are amazing, or that they teach responsibility, or that they form a stable society over the long run, or that they encourage good behavior. We're not talking about any of that.
Yep.
Because none of that's on the table. We're talking about government policy. Government policy doesn't have anything to do with responsibility.
No, it does not. Man. And it is 1.2 trillion, I think, the last time I saw, isn't it?
What's the student loan debt?
Yeah.
I don't
Somewhere
know.
up there. It's a lot. It's a lot.
What will be very interesting, maybe U.S. Department of Education to suspend student loan debt. Student loan debt statistics in 2020, 1.6 trillion. It's 1.56 trillion.
Oh. It's a pretty penny.
Yep. The average student loan debt for a member of the class of 2018, the average is $29,200. The average, which is just crazy. The average.
And if they were having a hard time paying it back with the economy we supposedly had the last 4, 5, 6 years, imagine how much harder it's going to be to pay it back with the new normal economy. And again, it's like I think we're talking about the same thing that we were just playing with the mortgages. Is it in the long run? Not that it's the right thing to do, but we're talking about the government. They don't do the right thing. They do bad. They always do bad. So what's the less bad? If they paid people's mortgage and rents for a series of months, would that be better than bailing out a bank that holds the mortgages? So let's say the government pays for 1,000 or 1,000,000 mortgages, and it costs them, 500 million or 5 billion, 500 billion, whatever. If you're going to start to go and bail out the banks, they're not going to say, well, they owe us $5 billion. They're going to say, but to be bailed out, we need 2 trillion. That's what happens. It never is exactly what they might be owed. It's just like right now. Why are the banks getting out of the 6 trillion? I don't understand why we keep talking about $2.3 trillion in the first bailout. It was 6 trillion. It was 6 trillion that they printed up. So the people, the small business and people and everything, that only equaled up to 300 billion, 400 billion, not even that much. So you have $4.5 trillion. Where'd it go? Went to banks.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. It's going to be trillions of dollars.
Always more than just the amount.
Yeah.
I wonder if you were talking UBI versus bailout, Josh. You were saying it's got to be this or that, and I kind of agree with that. I wonder which one serves the political class better. UBI is an interesting tool for them because it gives them like a volume knob on dealing with crisis where they don't have to issue an emergency bill. Like right now, whenever something really crazy happens, there's an emergency spending bill or a bailout bill or a Emergency Powers Act or whatever. But if you just put a policy in place that says, there's a government program and it's our volume knob on socialism, then they could just alter that. They could just turn it up or turn it down. It'd be more like the military budget. Like it used to be. There had to be like a declaration of war before they could even get the money to make the tanks and the airplanes and all that junk, right? But then once you get a standing army and you just have a defense, quote unquote, budget, then you just turn the knob up or down. Yep. So anyway, I don't know what would appeal more from a policy.
No, I think the UBI is exactly why they would, because they wouldn't even have to announce it. Mm-hmm. Let's just say all of a sudden, instead of getting $1,500 a month, you got $2,500 on this month. They can ratchet it up and pull it back, ratchet it up and pull it back, not even have to make an announcement. You just notice it in your bank, just like sending troops into Syria. You just send them in, you pull them out. You send them in, you pull them out. They don't have to make the big thing. They don't have to get together and have a vote. They don't have to wait for guys like Rand Paul or Massey or whatever to say, rah, rah, rah. We don't have to listen to that crap anymore. We have this mechanism already in place where we can ratchet up the money or lower it. And it will, not that it'll be lowered, but it'll be ratcheted.
Yeah, well, UBI, that concept, even in the Soviet Union, you still had to work for your money. It was just administered by the state. So the UBI concept is new, and so, but like we said, it's not sustainable. So in the long term, what would they do if they're just paying out cash to people for not doing anything at all? How would that be sustainable in any way at all? And so I could see them just take what they've already done to a further extreme and just take ownership of all businesses. And then if you want the check, you go work at the state office, the state production office, or whatever it is, making tanks or making warplanes, whatever. And so I can see this I can't see this as something sustainable that's going to continue on, the whole idea of UBI, but instead as a transition from a market economy to a state-owned economy.
Yep.
I could see that. What do you think on the timeline for that?
I really wouldn't know. Less than 5 years.
I could see that. I think it'll be more than 2.
I would agree.
I could see next year.
Really?
This time next year, because we're getting primed to be ready for coronavirus part 2 in November, which is going to, whatever's left of an economy then is going to be pillaged, destroyed. And the only way we're going to be able to come out of it this time is a really centrally planned market economy, whatever that means.
It'll be
Right.
That's the words they'll
economy.
use. It will be so orange. The sun will be shining everywhere. The orange glow. And I'm not saying that will happen. I've actually thought about that. What you're saying, Mike, is in, I think, a year's time.
What do you think for Mike? You on that timeline, you sold some property. You're out of the property game, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, just in time.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Back in November.
I have a vested interest in the dollar value of housing not falling, which I'm sure affects my opinion. But what do you think? What do you think about that? Like, what do you think about? So we went to Mexico this year in February. I'm sort of planning on going for a lot longer this year, like a couple months. And I'm planning on actually going there earlier. I got a friend of mine who's scoping some property down there. And I'm wondering what you think about the time frame for selling property in America before either the housing price collapses, which I don't know what I think about that, or before the planned economy begins to emerge. How would that affect the ability to liquidate assets, do you think?
I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't give advice, right? All I can say is what I would do. I would do what I did before, back in November, sell it, because as things progress, people aren't going to be able to get loans for a house, and so that in and of itself is going to bring the price down. I'd want to put it on the market right away, unless it's a place that you intend to keep as your bug out or your permanent residence for the next 50 years. Yeah.
Well, what if this scenario, and I kind of think this scenario might play, right? The state, our politicians want to, on the one hand, want to shut things down, but they don't want it to affect us at all. They want us to think that it's not affecting us at all, which is why we're getting checks in the mail, UBI, debt relief, blah, blah, blah. The Small Business Administration is loaning money directly to small businesses now. You used to have to go to the bank and they would go to the Small Business Administration and go, hey, will you guarantee at least 80% of this loan? And if you do, we'll loan this small business, blah, blah, blah. You don't even have to go to the bank anymore. You go to the big bank, the government bank. So in that mindset, where the government wants us to think that everything's just fine, What if they're the ones giving the loans out for the homes? I mean, OAC thinks everyone ought to have a home. So what if you just go to the urban and housing development and get your loan for the new house? What's your credit score? 0? Call. Step right up. How much? Oh, what? All right. Well, here you go. Here's your down payment. Here's your, let's see. Now we have to decide what houses you can have because, everyone can't have a mansion like we have, the government guys. So here's your allotment. Let's see. Yep. Here's your $1,200 a month for the payment. Here's your $30,000 for the down payment. Here's your house. And the economy's still going because look at here. We still have construction guys building homes. We still have people buying lots and selling lots. And the government is the new bank. So no one feels any pinch for as long as they can make us not feel the pinch. I can really see them doing that because the biggest thing they don't want is to have people get pissed off and have, the second revolution or even not vote them in. We have an election coming up this year. I think 90% of what's going on this year is all because of the election with some of the, I think a lot of it is. So what if we just have the government saying, feel no pain. The new United States Bank of America, not Bank of America, United States Bank of America.
Right.
Where everyone's pre-approved.
Yep. And that's so basically you're talking about the socialist dream, having UBI for a chicken in every pot, free car, free house, all that essentially.
And they can get away with it for a while because America has so much wealth. I mean, we always point at, well, look at over here. It failed because they were poor countries. Cuba was poor. Russia was poor. All these places were poor. They can get away with it in America, and they have to an extent already with some of these policies because we have accumulated so much wealth over the last 220 years. And they can eat that wealth. It's kind of like the state of Alaska's permanent fund. There's $60 billion in there. Well, it wouldn't last forever, but they could spend $5 billion a year and give everyone free cash money for a long time.
Yeah, well, it's
12 years. It could last 12 years.
Right. It's the worms eating the corpse of America, and there's a lot of corpse there to eat up.
Mises has two sayings about that. One, I'm trying to find them. One of them was, I would love to bring them up here. So, Mises, eating the seed corn. If you guys look this up, one of his sayings was that if you have a somewhat functional economy and it moves into that, makes that transition to a control economy, like Mike's talking about, that's what you're doing. You're eating the seed corn. And we all know, like anybody who's run a business or whatever, you got to have some cash to do anything with. Like if you have a business that does, let's say it does $500,000 a year in business, but your cash reserve is 0, you're going to be out of business in like a year. But if you do $500,000 worth of business and you got $100,000 cash reserve, you're going to be rocking and rolling because you can plant seeds, you can harvest them, you can wait on stuff. You're not in a crisis, and that's a big deal. His other thing that he said was, he said, here it is. Here we go. This is a synopsis of what he said about furniture. There'll be a couple. He said, such policies are analogous to the government heating its home by burning the furniture. Burning the furniture might get you through a few winters, but unless it is eventually replaced, there is nowhere to sit and no fuel for next winter. Fortunately, our ancestors were industrious and frugal, creating a lot of furniture. We stayed warm for a long time as a result, but the furniture is disappearing.
They can get away with it for a while.
Well,
They'll not only say let them eat cake, but they're going to provide the cake.
For sure.
Mhm. Well, yeah, you remember the last, real monetary crisis was the Great Depression, and I mean there were others, but that was the last big one that compares to this. And the currency was backed by gold at the time at $20 an ounce, and then they had to revalue it at 35 an ounce, and then confiscate gold in order to have the gold available to back new currency and to cover the trading shortfalls with Europe. And now the currency is backed by debt. So I could see them absorbing the existing debt to issue new currency, which means the Federal Reserve owns all the mortgages. And
Thanks,
so,
Dick.
yeah,
Which they kind of do anyway.
right, yeah. But this leads into the whole idea that Josh was talking about. Government owns the houses and gives the loans out. So everything has become nationalized in order to pay for UBI.
Mm-hmm. Boldly marching forward.
It's a true Soviet state. It really is.
And don't expect any resistance from, either side, either part. We already know the Democratic Party's been pushing for it, but don't expect any resistance from a Republican Party. Mm-hmm. They love power as much as anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nor is it something to exert any effort towards. The ship has sailed. What's that? That's that song everybody knows. Everybody knows the dice is loaded. Everybody knows the good guys lost. Yeah. So yeah, we're not talking about turning the ship around.
The new normal.
Yeah, we're not talking about Joe Hazelwood being sober and not wrecking into the reef in Valdez. He already has. The oil's in the water. It's over. So what do you do? Those are interesting scenarios. Those are interesting scenarios. Those are interesting things to watch for.
At this point, you steal a dinghy and run off as fast as you can with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, we have, just, it just sounds outlandish. I mean, everything that's happened already is outlandish. Again, go back to December of last year. No one in their right mind would have ever thought. I mean, this is every libertarian's dystopian dream. We're just waiting for this to happen, and now it's happened. And we're like, crap, they actually did it. We're effectively under martial law.
Yeah.
And all the 3%ers that were, everyone was waiting for it to rise up and take back the U.S. and rah, 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 make America great again or restore the Constitution. It not only has it not happened, they're the ones going, well, you better stay at home. Government knows what they're doing. It's like, I gotta, I think I said something about this. I don't know if I said it on air, but I'm a part of a text group that I was brought into. Bunch of really good conservative guys, Christian men. And the other day, one of them, they sent a meme and it had an AR-15 on it. It said, remember, lesson number 1, never let the government take your guns. And I wrote them back and said, but let them close your churches. And I was already ostracized about a year ago from it, but for some reason, one of the guys likes me, so he kept me in the group, but no one ever replied, not one reply. So, we're living that. And the governor of Alaska has these, now whether or not they're legitimate or whether or not they're they hold actual law, I don't think they do. But he has these emergency powers to the middle of November. He wanted them to the middle of next March because he said, well, this is going to come back up. The legislature pulled back. They wanted to pull it in July, I believe, June or July. But a lot of people were like, they were scared. We got a couple responses back to the email that we sent yesterday, and they were scared. they couldn't believe that this was happening, and all they were getting information from the federal government. They were seeing, plus they were watching the news, and they thought, what do we do? Our responsibility is to protect. And one of the things that I got from this, they weren't so concerned about protecting the people of Alaska. They were scared for themselves. They were literally, what do we do to protect us? What do I do to protect myself? Well, I don't want anyone going around and getting me sick. That was what really happened. But now he has these powers to the middle of November, when everything we're already being told is going to ramp back up again. You think he's going to relinquish the power, or do you think there's not enough people in there that gave him the power to November to extend it till next November, or the November after that?
There's a Corey made an observation in a past show that I think is pertinent. It's like good to think about with the governor and the president and whatever, and elected officials in general. It's that their main purpose, their primary purpose, is to be a scapegoat.
Yeah.
Their primary purpose is to be there to make decisions that no matter what decision they make, it's going to be wrong for a lot of people. And they're going to make it with inadequate information. And they're going to be judged not based on how good the decision was at the time they made it, but they're going to be judged based on how the future plays out. And if you put yourself in that position, if you put yourself in that position, there's no way that any person can make those decisions on that scale and be right. And so the job of the governor and the president and stuff is sort of just to be the scapegoat for everything that goes down. And so it's likely that just the cycle of new ones will just speed up a little bit, and that the trend will continue.
It goes to show that it goes to show that the whole idea of representative government doesn't work, because the primary interest of the politician is often to cover their butts, like we were talking about yesterday, and because they don't want to be they don't realize that they're elected to be the scapegoat. They don't want to be a scapegoat. They think they're there to represent people and do good, but it's not possible in that system. And the only person that is appropriate to represent you is you yourself. So I think through this it's been proven, through what Josh just shared, it's been proven that representative government is a total farce.
Or the limits on it are, it's great for making insignificant decisions that are mundane, maybe who will build the roads? Well, maybe you could make a case that nobody in a neighborhood, what do they call those things? Whatever. You have your neighborhood organization.
An HOA.
Yeah, there's HOAs, and then there's just your road commission or whatever. Somebody has to pick a guy to plow the road, right? Like to plow the snow, and somebody has to pick a guy to run a grader over it if you live on a dirt road. And nobody in the neighborhood wants to do it because it's a pain in the butt, and you got to go around and get $50 from your neighbors every few months or whatever. And so those are great jobs. A road service district. Yeah, Leland nailed it. That's a great job for the government because it's a boring job that has to happen. And it's nobody wants to do it. But it needs to be done. And those are mundane things that actually matter. But really significant stuff. And if a mistake's made, let's say the road service district guy gets a crappy guy who doesn't plow the road when it snows, it's not the end of the world. And the neighbors complain to him, he gets a couple emails or whatever, phone calls, and then he calls the guy and says, "Hey, you kind of suck, so we're going to hire somebody else." That's like a perfect, if you're going to talk about a world with government, or where you don't want it's more efficient than hiring 20 people to plow a little segment of road. That's great. But with really significant, as the decisions get more significant, the error between the decision somebody else would make for you and the decision you would make for you grows.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And the consequences of those decisions grow tremendously.
Yeah, and putting a gun in their hand actually makes it worse for them, because now the people doing the scapegoating expect them to use the gun, and now they really have to cover their butts.
Mike,
So
but think about this situation.
The politicians might be happier if they didn't have the guns.
They don't even have the gun, and it's still happening.
Uh-huh. Right.
I mean, the Alaska stuff we talked, they don't even have a gun to enforce it, and they're still getting away with it.
But they have to create the image that they do have the guns, because the people who would scapegoat them for not threatening to use them.
Mm-hmm. Well, we saw that with the Burrow Wood Stove ban.
Mm-hmm.
The conservatives who voted for it said, well, there's no police powers. And the liberals who voted against it said, well, we can add police powers later. But they were basically in agreement that we should put this policy in place. And then, anyway, yeah. Well, this is human. This is people stuff. And so we're not going to change it. And that's one of the, inane things about libertarians. Are we going to change it? But we get to move through it.
Right.
We get to move through it. I'll be looking at the housing market. I've been looking at buying another place here. I'm going to look at, there are options. That's an interesting take. I appreciate your take on that. What is your take on mining? Are you looking at, do you think there's any mining opportunities in Fairbanks or in the interior in Alaska in general that could be good to get in on? Is that on your radar at all?
I have not looked at it recently at all. I'll have to look into it.
That's why you need to get back so we can brainstorm, Mike.
Yeah, I know. I did have some thoughts regarding, not regarding metals, but I'll run it by you when I get back there, Josh. But as far as being, libertarians often want to identify the problems to change the world, but it's not going to happen. The real benefit is if you're able to identify the problems and look at it from an altitude.
All right.
And if you look at it from altitude, you can see causes and you can see places to go. You can see solutions. So that's for yourself. So that's the benefit of it. Don't expect to change society, because it's like trying to stop the tide by standing on the beach. It's not going to happen.
Totally. Totally. And then the flip side of that is, there's the guy with the starfish, right? He's walking along the beach and he's throwing the starfish back in, and the person next to him's like, there's millions of starfish here. You're not going to make any difference. And he says, oh, I made a difference for that one.
Right.
I think your point, Mike, about housing and not being able to get loans, I think that's 100% valid, and it'll be very interesting to see how they navigate that. One thing that's interesting about that is the opportunities that creates to do personal type loans and things like that between friends and community. I got a buddy of mine who's looking to get into a new place, and he's paying rent, and he's never going to have enough cash saved to buy a place with the price of rent. But he could make a mortgage payment, because mortgage payments are less than rent where I am, but he could never make a down payment. Right. And I've been talking to him about that, and there's no institutional solution that doesn't result in him being a slave. But there's no private solution that involves me not taking some risk. And so I'm thinking about that, but there's going to be a lot of opportunities for the non-institutional economy as the institutions break down, which will be neat, because those agreements are not governed by these weird rules that we're seeing right now.
Right.
What's going on, Corey?
Hey, how's it going? I was talking with Adam 2 days ago, and he was telling me about BlockFi, and it's a crypto peer-to-peer loan system. And he said, I was looking for the rates. It depends on which coin, but some of the coins are as high as 8% annual return. And so it kind of cuts out the bank and lets you loan your money at some form of a market rate.
Boom.
Yeah, there should be a rates page.
Except, right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's buried somewhere, but oh, there it is. So yeah, he was saying he's been trying that out, and it's been working pretty good.
Right. And one of the things this lets you do is, I think he mentioned this to me. You can straighten me out on this. Let's say you have a bunch of Bitcoin. Let's say you have if you have 100, let's say you have 100 Bitcoin. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? And you need, that's $700,000, but you need like half of it. You need like 350,000 because you're going to you're going to build a multi-unit housing complex. You need cash. You can retain ownership of your Bitcoin and take out a loan. And the terms of the loan are that you have to pay. So somebody in this system here gives you cash, and the Bitcoin is collateral against that cash. And you have to pay them back cash at 8.6%. But if you believe that Bitcoin is going to appreciate more than that, then you're making money on the loan. And if you default, they get your Bitcoin.
Yeah,
I think it's something like that.
Yeah,
right, and this all happens outside of the banking system.
Yep. Right. This was a conversation I was having with him like a month ago, and there's a lot of stuff in the crypto space that appears to me is just copying stuff that the banking system already provides, but it does it without the banking system. And my point was, I'm not sure that from a consumer's standpoint that's good enough that it just duplicates what the bank already does. But this is letting people be the bank and lend their money. So.
Yeah, which is a huge step forward.
Yeah.
And the fees are way lower. I mean, this isn't so Bitcoin tier 2 right here. If you want to do a 5% or a 5 Bitcoin or more loan, the APY is only 3.2%. That's basically what a bank loan is. Actually, I mean, that's what a good mortgage is. Like a bank loan just for cash is way more than that.
Credit cards, 18. Some of them.
Those U.S. dollar coins. Those are backed by actual dollars, and
yes.
So there seems to be a high demand for dollar coins, which makes sense,
right?
Because people need it in dollars to spend it,
right? Yep. And then here's their fees. Their fees are minuscule. Oh, look at that! Crypto pairs only. Sorry, can't trade into cash.
Alaska's actually on both lists. It's the only one on both
can't
lists.
Trade.
So I don't know what that means.
It means
that there's nobody in Alaska doing this. So
except Adam.
I've got a support ticket. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, so what we were talking about is a little bit of decentralization. And I think that one of the problems that it seems like we're beating up libertarians, but it's kind of fun, is,
they're used to it.
Yeah, that's true. But libertarians, we've talked about decentralization. Well, they only got, you can't have a centralized government. You gotta have decentralized. Gary North talks about the ultimate decentralization is every community is its own government. These things, which is much better than a federal government for sure. But I think the problem that we've had for so long is we expect the government to decentralize. Ain't gonna happen. ever since there's been a state, the last thing they think about is how do we decentralize and make it better for the people? No, they think how do we get bigger? We're the decentralization. We have to come up, human beings, individuals, we come up with the decentralization. I think what Corey just brought up is prime example of it. Get out of the centralized banking system. Here's a different way to do it. Helping your friends out with, they've talked about, in the past, we talked about how cool it'd be to have a little warehouse where you had your own storage with different people in the community or whatever. Maybe not. No. Different people in the community say, hey, we want to be part of this storage. So you're not relying on the state of Alaska and their food stores. Oh, boy, we've only got 6 months worth of food stores here. Who cares? We've decentralized. We don't need you. We have to be decentralized in our own lives, with our own community. In community, I mean the four guys, I'm looking at me too, the three guys I'm looking at, or the people that are watching. We are the decentralizing factor. And the only time it'll happen is not waiting for the government to decide to do it. We do it. And you can be tiny projects, small ways of doing it, or larger. And then we don't need the government or care what they do. But, it's like this whole show, we've talked about what they could do, what we think they're going to do. And we're not saying this is right. We're not saying, yeah, oh boy, so glad that we're going to have UBI. How exciting. No, that's bullcrap. But it's going to happen. So how do we decentralize? Here's what's going to happen. How do we decentralize our own lives with the community that we have? And I don't mean the Fairbanks community. I'm talking about community is Rick, Layla, Nameless, Corey, David, Michael, Christian, Ty Code. That's community.
You mean it doesn't include
apiaries?
We got Rick on the line here.
Yeah.
Oh, snap.
Ba-boom.
Part of the community.
Rick, what is going on? You were on there.
Hey, thanks. Good show today. I just, as far as that decentralization goes, one of the things that this whole thing is making that whole, in the old days, back in the days of the revolution, you could go gather in the tavern with your, what they call the Sons of Liberty or whatever, and plan things out. Today, you will be arrested for sedition, even talking about it.
Well, not at Denny's.
Do everything on. I wouldn't even trust Denny's these days. Well, I know exactly what you're saying there. Yeah, got it. Okay, yeah, I got that. Yeah, referring back a while. Yeah. So, I think that's and they've got everybody so brainwashed into this that, like Michael was saying, I think it's hopeless to try to, as he said, stand in front of the wave. But at the same time, Josh and I were talking about this yesterday. It's like, I don't want to run. I don't want to hide. And, in some ways, I think it's important to put these things forward, just like Josh did with the email, to people and, to the ruling classes. And same thing at my work. I'm having the same problem there where everybody is just frightened like little lambs. And I've been depressed here for the last week because I just feel like my fellow Alaskans are not what I expected, I guess. I thought we'd be tougher.
Well, except that we're kind of conditioned to follow the lead of our so-called leaders.
Oh, actually.
And when Juno's scared, or when Juno does these things, we kind of go, well, they must be doing even though they shut down business or whatever, it's got to be the right thing. The other thing is they're kind of on the hook because they voted for him. How can you not say they're doing the right thing when they voted for him?
Yeah. It's of course you'd have to say you were wrong. I don't know. So, David, on another subject, you were talking. I would want to get back to you about this earlier from in the week when you were talking about the negative oil prices last Monday, and I haven't had a chance to call in since.
Yeah, so lay it on me.
Okay, so anyway, this one market blog I read, the guy was saying, and I didn't realize this, and it may or may not be true. This is just something I read, but he was saying that this was an unbelievable error on the CME to allow oil to go negative in the first place, that it should have been cut off. And he believes that by doing this has set a precedent that originally came from setting negative interest rates, allowing the central banks to set negative interest rates. And, and now we're seeing this go into the markets right now in the mercantile exchange. But without a doubt, these kind of things expand and will go over to the stock market. And the thing has always been that when you were a buyer, you had limited risk. Your risk was always bounded by zero. And now it's not. Now you have unlimited risk when you're buying. Now selling, when you were selling short, then that's a different story. But when you bought a stock or whatever, and even now still you can buy a stock, but I don't doubt it's going to creep over into that as well. And the point is what he's saying is this: once you go to unlimited risk in the markets, everything has to be re-evaluated from that point of risk. And so that means the risk is infinite or unbounded. And he says, down this road lies literal beheadings and other forms of ugly. And he says that's going to drive us into civil war.
Yeah. It's the Bosnian style civil war, Sure. I saw you sent an article.
I did send that, yes.
About
I was
that.
wondering what you thought about that. If you had a chance to read it, I didn't know, but I thought I'd bring that up because those are the main points. He says, we normally respect the alleged rule of law because it bounds our risk, under that system. And at least in theory, the rules are known before you start. And now it's like, you have no clue.
Well, this is a little bit like if you produce something or whatever, what's the bound on the liability, both in dollar amount and in time? And they're agreed upon. Well, a lot of it's just social constructs, which are great. Like most societies made by that. So you sell something, or like somebody buys a used car from you. If they come back 3 years later and say, "Hey, these wiper blades are not clearing the windshield very well," but yeah, nobody in the society is gonna, have anything to support them on with that. But yeah, if you don't have downside, if you can't bound the downside risk, then you can't price the asset, because the price is a function of the opportunity weighed against the risk, or the perceived risk.
As is all life, yes.
Right, as is all life. And so nobody knows the future. And so the agreements that we have are, this is the extent to which I'm going to hold you over the fire. And worst case, and you'll reciprocate, and you won't hold me over the fire any worse than that, right? That's the bounding of risk. So yeah, what you're saying, what that article is saying, and what you were saying was, when that becomes unbounded, like, then yeah, you can't price anything. And to exacerbate that, how can you price? It's already hard enough to price assets because the denominating currency has uncertain value.
and it's constantly changing.
Yeah, that's interesting. It was interesting watching the oil price bounce back and try to figure out what the heck it should be.
Yeah,
like it's still hunting too. It's still hunting because it's like, oh crap! Like next month when delivery contracts come due, what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I bought back in. I bought back in on oil. We'll see. I'm gonna take the. I'm just gonna be along.
Oh well, I know what it's gonna do then.
I'm just gonna be along for the ride. But I wouldn't. Yeah, that's a very interesting point on commodities going negative.
I have seen some predictions that oil is going to bounce back so much that you're going to see Ford F-250s up for pennies.
Oh, yeah, well, Mike was saying that. Mike was saying he expects shortages.
And, and nobody will be able to afford a gas guzzler again, It'll be right back to that situation. So, anyway.
Well, Aaron was telling me, my brother Aaron.
Oh, go ahead.
The companies there in North.
What?
We're losing you, Josh.
They're going to shut down all the oil.
That must be what it is.
Bandwidth limitation.
How about now?
No, you're in and out. We're going to resolve this. We are planning on converting my shed on my property in Fairbanks into a studio, and I have 150 megabit per second Ethernet internet up there.
At the bottom of a cell tower, so there's good connection there.
Yes. You're smooth now. Oh, and now you're frozen again.
Oh, of course.
You're getting censored. What's going on in North Dakota is being censored. Rick, what are you're more towards the end of your career, and you've talked about like your house being a part of your, your assets. How does that?
Sure.
We're at different parts of our life and different asset classes and stuff like that. What do you think with, Mike and Josh and I earlier, we're talking about this socialism coming in or a control economy, and then Corey brought up these opportunities for loans outside of that. For somebody like you, what are you doing with that?
Boy, running scared. I mean, I'm with Mike. My feeling is should have put the house on the market last year, in my opinion. And but I wasn't ready, retirement wise, etc. And now we're kind of in this position where it's the market is not real good right now. Everybody's hunkering down still, and they're sitting on their money right now. I know people that they're trying to sell cars and stuff like that, and they're just nobody's buying. And that's the prices haven't come down low enough, obviously, but that means a crash or some kind of reduction, and that's what I'm afraid of. Is that we're going to see, you were saying that you don't think the government will allow that, but I think they got so many plates spinning now with all this. It'll be amazing if they can make it carry that off for any amount of time without a crash. They can't control everything.
Right. Right. Yep. They can't. They'll have to pick their battles. So is that something where you would think about? I mean, you've kind of just picked Fairbanks as your spot.
Well, I actually have been trying to work towards leaving Alaska, actually, because I grew up here, and if I have to get into a position where I have to grow food, this is a very tough environment to do that in primitive conditions.
Yeah, it's a lot of blueberries, which means a lot of diarrhea.
And it's like at my age, that I'm getting up to, it's like, I was just rereading Rose Wilder Lane's Jesus, what's the
Discovery
name
of
of
Freedom.
that? Discovery of Freedom. Yeah, I was just rereading it. She was talking about how the average person, up until just recently, worked 16-hour days just to put food on the table. Just to get enough to, and still didn't get enough to eat.
Right.
And those were in times when you had good soils and such like that. They didn't have the means we do now, but all those means are dependent on technology. So if we get into a position where these morons can't keep up the power grid anymore, I want to be in a position, I want to be in a place where, well, also towards the end of my life, I want to finally live somewhere where I can get natural vitamin D on a regular basis. Because I feel that's important for people, that's just one of the things that I've come to believe. And I love the sun anyway. Like today, even though it's cool out here, it's beautiful sun out today. So.
Yep, same here. I'm gonna get out in it as soon as we wrap up here.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. So you're still. It depends on how things play out over the next, let's say, year or two, whether you're able to shift into a different position or not. But for the time being,
correct.
You're kind of stuck where you are. Yeah,
because I'm pretty much in a cash position. Everything, all my other assets, I'm heavy cash.
Yep.
And so and I was doing that principally so I could be mobile, and ready to go. And that's one of the things that caught me on this whole thing coming up is normally I'm quite a good prepper and I have lots, I can survive for quite a while, but I've been cutting inventories down with the idea of, getting my house ready to go for sale, et cetera, and not having to have a lot of storage.
Right.
And so, it was like, I still had plenty of toilet paper, but it shocked me when that happened. So.
Cool. So that's a good. Thanks for the angle on that. I think the specific position that all of us are in is a little bit different, and it's interesting comparing notes because that changes the way we look at things.
It most certainly does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One of the things this has made me kind of reanalyze is I've always thought that renting was not a great idea, but I see the liability in property that can't be moved, and that
yes, it can be a big millstone.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to live. You have to be able to keep your property up, and what happens in bad times is properties run down and they lose value.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to me, it just I want to go somewhere where I can have just a small plot of land away from any, where they don't value the land really. I value the land, but they don't. and just to have it in a municipality, like say maybe, or in a state, say like Nevada or something, so I can have some kind of residency, and then and also have a place to hunker down if I do need to, like if food becomes short or whatever, and just starts stashing it away there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you'll get a lot of
the problem is
in Nevada.
Yeah. Well, depends on what part of Nevada, but the other thing is that you don't. I just don't know if my timing is such. For all I know, if they keep this up, they may not ever open the Canadian border for a year or something. And so my time frame may be completely lost at this point, and so I may have to stay here.
Yeah. Well, that's realistic and good to hear, and you got your plan. I know that several of us are working on we all have stuff in our own lives that we're trying to structure. We all have our own little personal projects we're trying to structure to help us move forward. And we're all looking at different options. And I think we keep sharing a lot of those options. It's not so odd for groups of people from a similar area to move together. In fact, that's how most movements happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yep.
And that is something that is increasingly on, I think, our collective radar. And we're sharing info about that. So, and that's one of the things, like, you're not in a position where you can do that, but some of us are in a position where we can go kind of explore and compare notes.
Well, and here's the thing, for some time, I still at this time, go back and forth between should I try to move out of the country or move somewhere remote down in the lower 48 type thing. And, because a lot of that has to do with, okay, my familiarity with the way things work in the U.S., is an advantage. And, Scott, or I shouldn't say his name, Buddha and I have talked often about going someplace, like, I don't know, Panama or, Costa Rica, Belize, those kinds of places, or getting a sailboat and going. But the problem I have with those is I'm not familiar with it, and it'd be like I feel like I might be leaping from the frying pan into the fire.
Mm-hmm. That's where moving without community is hard. Like, I moved to Canada without community, and I had a full-time job waiting here and a lot of money and stuff. And it cost a lot to do. I had to do stuff like rent a car for, a week and drive to the border to get my stupid paperwork done. And there was all sorts of like little incremental expenses. It ended up costing me something like 20 grand, 25 grand to move, just to get my junk here and everything. Because I had to stay in a hotel for a week when I got here, and I didn't have a place to move to. And it's way harder.
No support system.
Yeah, and you don't need much, like a tiny little bit. I wasn't part of a church community either. That wouldn't be a problem if I moved again. Because anyway, just personally speaking. And so I was just on my own, and that was my libertarian ethos. And man, it's expensive and it's hard. And if I hadn't had a job, or if I'd been fired or something or laid off, I would have had to come back to Fairbanks, and it would have been like another 15 grand to get back, and I would have been cleared out. So having everybody going at the same time probably never really happens, but having somebody go and having something set up can make it a lot easier. And I think we're in a window of time where, like, I don't know how things are going to go, but it may be some of our role to go and find places and set something up, and then to help other people get there or whatever. I don't know how the future is going to look, but I think
just go places and
report on them. Yep.
I was going to say, I remember when Jeff Berwick got involved in his Gulf Gulch thing. You remember that?
I do. Yep.
I got, I was looking at that pretty heavily, and then it collapsed. So. And that kind of scared me off from that kind of thing, because, it's community, but again, people I don't know.
What's that community centered around? It's
political. Well, it was centered around the libertarian or the anarchist.
Yeah. How do you organize a bunch of disagreeable people?
Herding cats, right?
It's true. At Anarchapulco this year, well, Mike and I got to see it front and center. You had these little pissing matches between like people who have 150 YouTube followers. Not us, we stayed out of it, and we have like almost 500 YouTube followers. But you'd have a guy who has like 150 YouTube followers, and he's like, he'd think he's kind of a big deal. And then this guy went toe to toe with Jeff and called him out on all his BS, and trying to dominate the conference, and how voluntary that. It was just hilarious. It was brutal, and I think it was a total highlight of what Corey pointed out. How do you organize disagreeable people? And they didn't. The people who knew each other got along great. The people who knew of each other, there was a lot of conflict, and there's a big difference there. And we actually know each other, right? And there's a difference between knowing somebody and knowing of someone, and that's where I think a lot of us,
agree.
a lot of those projects have issues because it's like, oh, well, I could get along with a voluntarist, but you're not getting along with an abstraction. You're getting along with a real person.
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, hey, I'll let you go. I enjoyed the conversation. I figured you needed a call anyway, so.
Yeah, we did. We got some new phone stuff going. It's sounding even better now. So thanks for testing it out for us.
All right, enjoyed it, guys. Talk to you later. Take
See you,
care.
Rick.
Thanks, Rick. A lot of those places too, like Acapulco, you were talking about. Not only did they not know, they knew of. I remember I knew of a lot of people that were going there that had big names or whatever, They didn't know each other, and they also, you're talking about a bunch of different cultures coming together and wanting to assimilate. That's not as easy as Americans try to make it sound like it is.
Nope. Another problem with the Anarchapulco community is they don't have a unified objective, like something to do that they're moving towards. And so
a lot of it's against something. And I don't
think
you can organize a positive around a negative.
Yeah,
yes.
Good point.
Yeah, there were a lot of discussions about what the most important thing to oppose was. But anyway, yeah. So these are things that, well, we'll just see what the future holds.
Which fundamentally, that question is, how do we put the brakes on other people?
That's true. That's very true. Yes. Yeah, that's very true. I think we've beat the dead horse here on positioning for the economic rebound and inflation. Is there anything else? I mean, is there anything else you guys are doing to position? There's like personal stuff, and there's political stuff and all of those. I've gone through my thoughts on this. Is there anything else you guys have for closing out on that?
Been sorting stuff. It's like organizing, getting rid of, and I think it's helped kind of shift some of the weights on the decision making matrix on what to keep and what not to keep.
So that's like getting yourself to the point where you can make the decisions to move.
Yeah. So I think that's a good that'd be my takeaways. Or having moved several times in the last few years, being organized makes that go a lot smoother. You don't want to wait and have the move looming in your mind. There's most of the move, like painting, most of the move is prep work. So having things organized, knowing inventoried, knowing where things are and what to keep and what not to is stuff you can be working on today.
Right
now.
Yeah, and that's I kind of did that when I sold the property back in November. I got rid of a lot of stuff, and Corey knows I still have a fair amount there. But yeah, part of that, like Corey was just saying, inventorying stuff. I can identify the exact location of everything I have inside my trailer, and then how much it weighs and all of that. So those are just things to get to get ready for it. And if you have so much stuff that you can't do that, maybe you have too much stuff. So yeah, but I'm still debating on exactly where to go, what to do, things like that. So that's probably something I'll have a phone call with you guys about at some point too.
Yeah, we have a bunch of different avenues on that. We also have a project. We have our little mobile home project. I got an email back on that. So yeah, it could be a busy summer. I'm going to be in Fairbanks this summer, and we'll have to put our heads and resources together and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, and then the other one too that we talked about in Acapulco. That maybe Corey can get in on that too.
For sure. Yes.
So, yeah, so there are a lot of possibilities like that. But that's the thing. Identify your community. We have a little community here, and identify who your community is and start working with them, because you're not going to have a decent life of any kind by being an individual hermit out in the woods for the collapse.
With your gold. That's what
Yeah.
Gollum symbolizes in
Yeah,
Lord of the
sitting
Rings.
sitting on your chest of gold with your 12 gauge. It's just, it's just not going to work.
David, you were talking about moving, and I had a very similar experience when I moved to Nevada in 2016, and I did not appreciate I didn't even see the community that I had in Fairbanks. I just wanted to get away from what it was, and it wasn't until I left it that I even recognized that it was there, let alone missed it. And yeah, it was. I remember I was right outside this window loading up my trailer and driving down the Alcan, and I had like if I didn't have something like a job that I was moving towards, I realized how difficult it is to move. There's a lot of anxiety about just getting ready for it, and let alone getting in the driver's seat and going. And yeah, it's tough going alone and showing up, and then my job fell through there after 6 months or so, and it's tough. And I, just like you, I didn't have a church and wasn't interested in the church. And later, just a couple months ago, I found one there that I visited, and I was like, wow, this was here the whole time. This would have completely changed my last couple of years if I hadn't been so stuck.
Yeah, that'll be something. It's funny, the stuff that I would look for in a place, or the stuff that I will be looking for in a place over the next year, as we all do a little bit of hunting, is different than what I would have looked for 5 years ago or 6 years ago. I've never heard of any.
Would you have listened to yourself before?
No.
Okay.
There's not a chance. But like a lot of these libertarian communities, like the last thing in the world they're looking for is a place with like a strong community built around a church. And that would be the way to integrate in the community at one of these places. Maybe find a nice Catholic church in Mexico. We'll see.
Yeah, I found that or saw a little bit of that in Acapulco as well. There's just because they're libertarians doesn't mean you can trust them. In fact, some of them can join the group just because they want to excuse their own personal bad choices. I'm a libertarian, therefore I can do all the drugs I want. So.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for popping on. We went a couple hours here. It's good. We've been talking about, just as a wrap up, we've been talking about getting back on KFAR for a short segment, like a half hour on Saturdays, and then doing the rest of the show. We're going to build a studio this summer with like sound insulation foam and real mics and stuff like that. So we're talking about doing that half hour on KFAR and then stream every Saturday, and then probably continuing our weekday streams, which are intermittent on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday towards the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So check those out if you haven't, and keep your eyes peeled for YouTube notifications that we are live streaming on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturdays. And we'll try to get more regular with the timing, but no promises.
And real quick, if you care to email, and politely so, different legislators. I did talk to one on the phone last night for a while, and for one, he said it was the first communication of that type that they've gotten. Someone that said, "Where is your authority come in here?" And he said that they've actually, some of them had actually talked about it, that they realized they don't have the authority to do what they've done. And I said, "Then how did you do it?" And he goes, "Well, we just did." And he said that there are several more people than we might think that are concerned about that. And what I thought was, he said, not the governor so much, but that he has a lot on his staff have been very concerned about the powers that he's assumed. That's kind of interesting. He said that any emails that go in, well, the email I sent, I guess he forwarded on to the governor and a bunch of his staff. And he said he thought the staff are the most important people to get it, because governor's a busy guy, ruling the world and all. But he said that he said, I forget what example he gave me, but it was something that wasn't good. And he said just a few people motioned in and said, "This is bullcrap. You guys can't do this." And he said it stopped it completely. So it sounds like most of them, not all, but a lot of them down there are a bunch of wimps, and they're if they get a little pushback, because like I said, this will end. And he said that there's a lot of talk going on about, well, what do we do next time? And if you're going to be here, I don't like saying beg the masters, but I don't think that's what we're saying to do. And just ask them, where's your authority to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Where's your authority to do this? You don't have it. And they know. And I think the more people tell them they don't have it, they're going to figure out, oh, other people know too. Nothing wrong with telling them that, I don't think.
Nope. And the staffers tend to stay on longer than a lot of the legislators. Like, a lot of the staffers will get carried over because they know the system. And so if the staffers are aware that a lot of the staffers do drafting and editing of the legislation too. Yep. So if the staffers are aware that these are the limits, that might actually keep a lot of this stuff from ever even making it to the floor.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point.
If you're into British comedy, Yes Minister series is excellent, and it lays that out very well, because the permanent undersecretary is the guy who actually runs the office in the government, and then he just has an elected person come through every couple of years that he has to put up different. He has to rearrange the mirrors and turn up the smoke machine to keep that guy confused, so he can keep running his business.
Yeah. I'm not saying that thinking that there might be a Patrick Henry in the works down there by any stretch of the imagination, but we can give him a few Patrick Henrys. And be respectful, because if you're a jerk, if you're a jackass, they're just not going to read it, right? There's a way to do it.
Huh.
You don't have to respect someone to be respectful to them while you're communicating to them.
Uh-huh.
But if you're going to spend the time to communicate with them, you probably want them to read it and maybe respond. So think about that while you're writing it.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't have to be flourishing and all cool and everything. You can just simply ask them what gives you the authority to do what you did. And I asked him that because he kind of bounced around on it. And I said, hey, I'm asked, what gave you the authority to give the governor this ultimate authority? He said, well, we don't have the authority to, we just did it.
Which is what people were asking for.
Yep.
And so they did it, and it's,
That's why it works.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So asking the questions is great. Asking the questions is great. A lot better than shrieking.
And it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, Josh's letter is pretty rad. Check it out. It's on. I posted the link to it. It's up in the comments. It's right here. Scroll up in the live chat. Follow that link. Give the letter a read. Super good letter.
And if anything, you just think to yourself, proving the delegitimacy of who they are as a state.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Calling it into question. Well, very cool. Thank you guys for getting on here. We will be back Monday or Wednesday. So look for that, and we'll see. We'll see what continues to shake out.
All right.
Sounds good.
Good seeing you guys. Thanks everybody for joining on YouTube and for the call from Rick. We'll catch you guys later.